On your Monday episode of Locked On Raptors, the Toronto Raptors fall on Friday night to the New York Knicks in a game that shows off the power of simply having no bad players.
You are Locked On Raptors, your daily Toronto Raptors podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hey, what's going on? And welcome to another episode of Locked On Raptors, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. It is Monday, December the 4th, and I'm your host, Sean Woodley. I've been covering the Toronto Raptors now for 10 seasons on various platforms. You can find all my work over on the website that's busted at Woodley Sean. You can find the show on Instagram at Locked On Raptors. And of course, you can come hang out in our Locked On Raptors Discord server. The link is in the description. It's free to join. There's like 250 little sickos just like you hanging out in there, talking ball, making fake trades, talking about Shohei Ohtani, who's definitely coming to the Toronto Blue Jays, right? Right? It's all going on in the Discord. Come hang out. We'd love to see you there. Also, a reminder, you can find the show for free wherever you get your podcasts over on the podcast app of choice that you use. We are also on YouTube every day. You can subscribe to the videos and hit the little notification bell so you never miss an episode when it goes live. We appreciate you so much for doing that, and we appreciate our everyday listeners for rocking with us as well. Today's show is brought to you by FanDuel, the #1 sports book in all the land. Make every moment more. Right now, new customers get $150 in bonus bets with any winning $5 moneyline bet. That's $150 if your team wins. Visit FanDuel.com/locked on to get started. And we will get started digging into a loss to the New York Knicks on Friday, a game that for the first half was one of the more entertaining games of the season to this point. And then it all came unspooled in that second half as the Knicks pulled away, and some kind of baffling lineup choices, among other things, caused the Raptors to lose the plot in this one. We will dig into that. We'll dig into the good, the bad, and the We'll dig into the 20-game mark and whether this team has a capacity for growth beyond what they've shown so far. And here to do all of that is our pal from the whole internet. He just writes everywhere. It's Oren Weisfeld. Oren, how's it going, pal?
Sean, thanks for having me. I was going to say earlier that a little sicko is exactly what people say to describe me. So maybe I'll hop on that Discord soon enough.
You would be
But no,
more than welcome and among friends and sickos just like you.
Yeah.
All right, let's get into it. The Raptors fall 119-106 to the New York Knicks on Friday. A game that, like I said, first half, really fun, back and forth battle. Scottie Barnes doing the thing. I thought just like a really fun NBA basketball game. Second half comes along. The Knicks, I think, powered by the fact that they just have a lot of really good players. Obviously, some really good three-point shooting, some very bad three-point shooting on the Raptors side of things, and some other stuff we'll get into. The Knicks pull away and win this one. Raptors fall to 9-11 on the season. Oren, what was your sort of biggest takeaway from watching this Toronto Raptors loss? A loss that, again, was just kind of a bummer considering how fun this game was to start.
Yeah, well, I think like you said, definitely the depth stood in stark contrast to each other. The Knicks go 9 deep, and like all 9 of those names are guys the average fan I think will recognize, and just really solid rotation player across the board. Whereas the Raptors, they're still very much in the process of searching for answers, searching for rotations, which guys play together, how many bench guys you can get away with playing together. And look, part of that is natural of having a new coach, and the Knicks are a team that has a ton of continuity, right? And the Raptors don't have that in their favor, at least on the coaching side of things. So you forgive a little bit of that, but probably other than the depth, the biggest takeaway for me was, I found like last year, a lot of times we could pretty simply say, and it was overly simplistic at times, but it was like either this team like played hard or they didn't. And we could chalk a lot of the losses up to like, these guys don't really give a crap, it seems like. I don't know. And this year, I don't find that. Like in a loss like the Knicks, like the Raptors played hard. They play hard pretty much every night. And that can almost be more concerning when you lose a game this like thoroughly to a pretty middling team and you do play really hard. But to me, it was probably like the defense, 17th ranked defense over the last 10 games for the Raptors. We all came into the season being like, the path to go be like a good playoff team is to have an elite defense. They're 15th on the season, 17th in the last 10 games, so it's not getting better. And that's really the concern. I thought the Knicks game was pretty ridiculous, honestly, where it's like Julius Randle gets a post up. You choose to double him, which fine. I'm not even here to criticize that. Like, I think he's good. He did have some success in one-on-one coverage. I also see the argument of just letting him kind of cook in the post and seeing how far that really gets the Knicks. But look, you choose to double him. The first pass out cannot be a wide open three every single time. You have to at least have that first rotation there and then make the Knicks put the ball in rotation and make them punish your defense and scramble after that. But it felt to me like every time Randle passed out of the post, it was a wide open three. And that was just pretty, for 20 games into the season, for your defense still to look that failable to the Knicks, who are a middling offensive team. I think that was the biggest concern for me.
Yeah, I totally agree. The two big things I wrote down from this game, the sort of reasons they lost, were the Knicks got a lot of good players. The Raptors have 5 or 6, and the Raptors defense, their rotations were just 2 steps too slow at all times. And it wasn't even just the threes either, right? It was like, you had the 2 players who were part of the double, and it didn't feel like the rest of the 3 players, knew the double was coming or what to do when the double was thrown onto Randle. And I thought there was some pretty nice doublings, different angles, a couple times where Randle just kind of like spun right into Pascal or Scotty, just kind of doing the verticality thing. But then you have like cutters getting lost off ball and just kind of screaming to the bucket for points. Or like you said, the sort of constant string of single pass threes. And yeah, I mean, look, this is not a team that's been a super aggressive defense this season. Maybe they're a little rusty when it comes to their scrambling out in all sorts of recovery mode and all of that. But you would think if your game plan is we're going to send a lot of attention towards Julius Randle down low, you would know kind of the response to that from the rest of the defenders on the floor. And it just felt like no one kind of knew what was up. And obviously you get a really nice shooting night from the Knicks in this one as well. 16 of 36, they shoot 44%. They're not going to do that every night, but they certainly didn't make it difficult on, say, Dante DiVincenzo, who went 7 of 9 in this game. A lot of those looks were just super wide open, and the result of either a couple of guys converging on Randle or collapsing in on Jalen Brunson, and Jalen Brunson kicks out, right? You had like 17 combined assists for Brunson and Randle in this game, 4 combined turnovers. It's just, you got to be a little more forceful when you are sending the double. And this is obviously weird to see because this is what this team did so well for so long. It was like their one thing they could do on defense. And it just kind of, was not there in this one by any means. Let's quickly talk about the offense too, unless you have a thought you wanted to toss in there.
I would just say, like, on the defense, right? Like, Darko likes to play it a lot more straight up than Nick Nurse did. And I think maybe a trend that we've seen the last few days, and it's early, maybe this is too early to say it's a trend, but that kind of style of like having one guy stick to their man and kind of playing this drop defense, I think it's heavily dependent on matchups, more so in a way that Nick Nurse's system was, right? So in this game, you have OG on Brunson, and Randle kind of gets the Siakam assignment, and he can punish that. And we saw in the Cavs game something similar, I think, where you had Garland and Mitchell, and they kind of put Scotty on Garland because they didn't really feel like they had a better. And so, yeah, it feels to me a little bit like unless you get the matchups perfectly in this system, you're really going to struggle because, like you said, it's not as aggressive and it's not as kind of matchup independent maybe as Nick's system was.
Yeah, I think that's a really good point. And look, you would think that in most cases, the Raptors have the personnel to like handle a couple of big horses on the other team. And I feel like maybe sometimes like that Cavs game you pointed out, like to me, that was just, well, put Schroeder on Garland, right? Like stop with this Scotty on the perimeter thing. It feels like there are better matchups out there for them to throw against these guys, and they haven't really gotten to that. Maybe there's less of a surefire matchup when you have Brunson and Randle to deal with as 2 very different types of players. OG kind of best suited to guard both of them probably. So what do? Do you have Schroeder guard Brunson? Like, is that something you can get away with? It should be, frankly. Like, that's Schroeder's whole thing, is point of attack defense and all that. They seem to have not loved him in those sort of one-on-one matchups against lead guards. But yeah, it's they have the defensive talent to be a very good defense. There's no doubt about it. But yeah, there are certain matchups where if you are going to play that straight up man-to-man thing, you got to have a little more juice, I suppose. And yeah, if you're going to do the doubling thing, like you got to have more of a plan and intentionality. They just didn't seem to have that in this one. And it was a lot of wide open threes, very reminiscent of when the defense would come unspooled during the worst of the Nick Nurse era. No doubt. I was mentioned the offense. We don't need to talk about the offense. It was the offense. They were 76.7 offensive rating in the half court. It stunk. They were amazing in transition. Yeah, this is kind of the story we know. Let's move on. Let's get into, in a second here, the 20-game mark, the hallowed 20-game mark. I talked about this a bit on Friday's podcast, but this is sort of the time where the common wisdom is this is when we know what teams are. We're going to get into whether or not we know what these Raptors are and what kind of growth or progression they may or may not be capable of in various aspects of the team coming up in just 1 second. Before we do that, however, got to tell you about today's sponsor, which is Jace Medical. Look, it's the time of year where you might be traveling quite a bit. There's also lots of bugs going around, people getting sick, people getting the flu, et cetera, et cetera. And Jace Medical offers something that can be there. You may never have to use it. The idea is you never have to use it, but you can pack it away in your bag when you travel so you know that you are going to be prepared if something goes bad and you start to fall ill while you're away from home on your holiday during the upcoming weeks here. The Jace case is a pack of 5 different antibiotics to treat a long list of bacterial illnesses, including UTIs, respiratory infections, sinusitis, skin infections, among others. This stuff can happen to anybody when you're on vacation. It's nice to have that peace of mind, knowing in your bag there's a nice little package with all the stuff you might need, along with doctor recommendations for how to use it safely, access to the doctors at Jace Medical to use it safely as well. Visit jacemedical.com and complete your physician encounter. It will be reviewed by a board-certified physician, and your medications will be dispensed by a licensed pharmacy at a fraction of the regular cost. It's never been more important to be prepared than today. Go to jacemedical.com and use the offer code LOCKEDON to get $20 off of your order. Okay, we continue on here. Oren Weisfeld of Sportsnet, of Complex, of the Internet is here. As we dig into the Raptors' loss to the Knicks on Friday and now take stock after 20 games. Oren, I would say so far, it's pretty much gone to script in a lot of ways. Outside of like Scotty Barnes looking like a world killer, I think that's been a little bit premature and ahead of what most people expected. But for the most part, Raps are 9-11. They've played the 7th toughest schedule in the league so far. So that's, take that how you want to take it, I suppose. Half-court offense, basically what we expected. 26th in the league. It's been really bad. Had some really, really nasty nights. Some good nights to offset it, but some really, really grim numbers in a lot of these games. Second in transition offense, not a huge surprise there. 10th in half-court defense, 14th in transition defense per clean the glass. Is anything that we've seen from this team so far surprising to you? Like, do you feel like this is basically gone as you expected? And is there anything that we haven't seen yet that you maybe think there's still room for, right? Like, again, I talked about the 20-game threshold is sort of the colloquial, all right, this is when we know about this team cutoff. It does feel like we probably know a lot about what this team is, but is there anything that is still left to surprise us, do you think? Do you think there's a capacity for this team to be better than what it's been through 20 games so far?
Yeah. I'll start with the kind of surprises and you mentioned the big one, Scottie Barnes. I think it's been talked about a lot. Dennis Schroeder I would also throw in there, just maybe the greatest free agent signing in Raptors history when all is said and done, and I know the bar is low, but he's honestly been amazing. So those two in terms of like players are definitely the only two big positive surprises. I would say, and maybe this isn't a huge surprise for people who followed this team, but to me, a little bit of a disappointing surprise was I did think the bench was going to be better this year.
Yeah.
Just based on, you give guys confidence, you let them play through their mistakes like Darko has. You tend to see guys play a little bit better when they have that kind of freedom. And there's been spurts where, Malachi, for example, has had a few good games. Definitely a better season than last year. But in general, to me, that is probably the biggest disappointing surprise of the season is just how bad the bench has been.
Yeah.
And yeah, you were going to mention like the offense against the Knicks game. That was probably, if you wanted to sum it up, a big reason they lost. Dante DiVincenzo basically tied the Raptors bench in points. The Raptors are shooting 40% from the field as a bench. Their bench is, and that's the worst mark in the league. Precious just really not up to his capabilities all season. Koloko's out.
Whack-a-mole, man. Total whack-a-mole with Precious. Like, and mostly bad, but some really good ones popping through, I
Sure.
guess. Yeah.
Sure, there's been good, but mostly he is hurting the team, unfortunately.
Mhm.
And, maybe you give him a bit of leeway because he's playing the 5 exclusively with
Mhm.
Koloko injured, but it is what it is. There's no other options at the backup 5. Gary's really struggled to fit into this system, I think. He's really the only guy you see take a bunch of dribbles and shoot like a mid-range pull-up, and I don't think that's what Darko really wants. And Malachi, McDaniels, like, you kind of hope that at least a couple of these guys would pop and that you'd have a semi-reliable bench, not one of the best in the league, but an okay one. Instead, it's really gone the other way, where the starters are propping them up every night, and you just kind of hope you survive those bench units. That's not a sustainable way to win in the regular season, as we know.
Mhm. Yeah, I think the struggles have been like everyone's kind of had a struggle in some way, shape, or form, right? There's been no one who's just like, okay, that's one bench guy you can set your watch to. Like
Yeah,
maybe Chris Boucher, but it's only
yeah,
because like he's gonna play like a maniac when he comes in. You don't really know what the results of said maniac play are gonna be, but he's gonna bring it like energy wise. Beyond that, like Gary, you mentioned Gary. Obviously, he had his stretches. He's kind of stabilized as a 3-point shooter. The twos have been kind of a nightmare all year. I still think he is the guy who is struggling the most with the zero point 0.5 ethos. Like he cannot make a quick decision to save his life. He had a couple nice dimes, I should say, in the game on Friday. He had the one to Yak in sort of
mhm,
semi-transition where he hit him with a nice bounce pass. He had a nice drive and dump off, I think, to Dennis, who was cutting at another moment as well. So there's like been some moments here and there, but it's just not nearly enough from a guy in Gary Trent Jr., who you kind of penciled in as like the 6th guy you could trust on this team. And it's just been
mhm.
way too inconsistent. And I mean, we'll have plenty of time to talk about his future, but it's been thrown into all sorts of doubt and confusion, I think, by this start. Precious, yeah, I mean, I'm never gonna quit him because like the best of
Same,
Precious is the
honestly.
sweetest of drugs. But yeah, it's minus 22 in this Knicks game. Really, really bad. Flynn, he had like a couple really nice games and then he's kind of fallen off the last few. And that's the Malachi Flynn experience basically his entire career. You know, do you think there's any to the point of like the 20
Yeah.
game thing and kind of knowing what the team is? Do you think there is capacity for growth for this bench unit in particular? Like do you think, maybe you work in Otto Porter Jr. more regularly if he's alive? Can Jalen McDaniels kind of bounce back? He's had a couple of spots lately where he's looked a little bit more comfortable on the NBA floor, if not effective, but like not totally like a deer in the headlights. Is there a pathway, or does it have to come via like outside help? And like, how do you reckon with that as a 9-11 team that already owes a first round pick this year? Like it's a bit of a tricky situation to sort out. I continue to maintain the problem with this team is not the good players, it's the bad players. How do you address the bad players? Do you think there's a chance that it can be addressed either internally or externally here over the next 20 games or so?
Yeah, usually I'm like very optimistic about the Raptors, and
Hmm.
even like when we were going to talk about things that I could see changing for the better, there is a couple things. But in terms of the bench specifically,
Hmm.
I don't see it happening this year. Like, to me, the biggest takeaway maybe through 20 games is that these young bench guys that we're talking about are just not ready to
Hmm.
be winning players this year. And that's not
Hmm.
the end of the world because, you give them another season to develop, and maybe by next season they are impact players, or at least a couple of them are. But to me, no matter, there's definitely room for growth because, like I said, they're the worst shooting bench in the league. Like, I'm not saying they're going to be the worst bench in the league all season, but so yeah, like maybe Otto finds his way into the rotation and he looks good. Maybe Jalen McDaniels starts knocking down shots and he looks better. Maybe Chris Boucher plays more. But in general, no, I don't really see a pathway to this bench being even kind of average because, just like you said, when you look at Malachi and you look at Precious, these guys just seem like they are still pretty youthful in their development. I know they're not the youngest guys, but to be fair to them, they have had really limited minutes in the NBA.
Hmm.
And you look at Gary, I don't see real signs of him fitting into the system. Like, he had a great game against Phoenix, and he's had a couple games here and there, so maybe those are signs of success coming, but I haven't seen enough to where I'm like, okay, I see something developing with the bench specifically. Um, the only real thing is, like you said, externally, if they were to trade one of those big wings, you could absolutely bring back some depth in a deal like that, and
Mm.
that's kind of the path I would see them taking.
Yeah, I mean, there are sort of like next tier guy. Like you can can you get a Kobe White? Can you get a Jaden Ivey like from one of these distressed teams that might just be looking to make a move for the sake of making a move? Can you capitalize on a team that's panicking and not send out like your best players in order to get that done to balance things out?
Yeah.
Maybe, I don't know. That's hard. Lots of teams are going to want those players. I mean, Kobe White in particular, I feel like if the Bulls are going full sale mode, anyone can use like a guard who can pop off for 30 any given night, even if he's not a perfect player. It's tough. I think for me, you know, I suppose Grady Dick is like maybe he comes in
Right.
and starts hitting some shots like that. But like if you're
Yeah.
counting on a 20-year-old and maybe Javon Freeman Liberty kind of being the guys to come in and save your bench, you're not really in the best of spots. Frankly, I
Yeah.
think the best thing they can do here is just stop with the minutes where they play 4 bench players with 1 starter, and maybe you alleviate some of your issues. They've had some success with in between lineups with 2 or 3 starters with a couple of bench guys sprinkled in here. And I feel like they keep on going to these 1+4 groups that just don't have a shot in hell. So maybe that's an avenue here. Let's pivot over to stuff that can improve that you feel optimistic about. What kind of comes to mind as the top 1 or 2 things that you feel like, you know, from this 20 game point, the Raptors can actually kind of change their DNA as a team?
Yeah, I think the biggest thing is the defense, like I
Mm,
said, just because to be fair, I said the same thing last season, but,
mhm,
as long as the talent is the talent and the roster is the roster, I'm gonna believe that there is another level to the defense.
mhm.
Um, we've seen it in spurts, but yeah, like we haven't really seen it for a sustained enough period of time, and I think they can get there just because I honestly just believe in like the individual talent and IQ of these guys, and specifically the top 5. Like, that starting unit should have a really elite defense. You add
Mhm.
Schroeder into the Van Vliet spot. You have a full season of Pirtle, who I really think has picked it up the last couple of weeks. And there's just no reason that it's going to be a middling defense all season. This could have to also, to cut Darko some slack, this could have to do with a little bit of a this is a drastically new offense, and we're
Mhm.
spending a lot of time learning it, and I would guess a lot of the practices have been that, because we've seen the defense look pretty basic, pretty, regimented NBA defense.
Sure.
Um, so maybe it's just that, and when they have a little bit more time to focus on the defensive end, it'll pick up, and I think that'll make their lives easier, obviously, in transition, and it'll make everybody's life a little bit easier. So that's the big one, and then the other one is what you just said about, it's kind of a question of how much do you care about development and how much do you care about winning, and
Sure.
I know those 2 things, like, can go hand in hand, but Darko has made it a point to say, "I wanna play 10 guys," and when you play these units with 4 bench guys, they inherently have more responsibility than if you played a unit with only 2 bench guys, where then they're gonna be just the role players on that unit. So I get it from a process standpoint. I really do get it more than most people, especially when it's Scotty as the lone guy and 4 bench players. Like,
Sure.
process wise, that's what you want to do to develop a team, but it's not getting the results they want. And so if we're concerned about winning, I do think that's a pretty happy balance of going 2 starters, 3 bench guys. You're still going to get a lot of responsibility for Precious and Malachi and those guys, but they'll be insulated a little bit more. And those minutes have been winning a lot more than the pure 1 starter plus bench minutes. So I think A, rotations slash substitution patterns, and B, defense are the 2 areas where they could improve.
With you fully on the defense, I still believe in their viability as like a top 10 group. They're right now 11th on clean the glass, 14th on NBA.com. So they're not too far out of that range. And I think, yeah, like the talent is so immense top to bottom when it comes to the main guys on this defense that it should be pretty good. As far as the bench guys, yeah, like I understand the wanting to balance the development with winning thing too completely. I guess it falls a little flat for me, these 1+4 groups, when you look at it and it's like, Chris Boucher, is he really part of the long-term plans here? I don't think so. Malachi Flynn, is he really part of the long-term plans here? Maybe, because you can like retain him for probably pretty cheap, but I'm still like jury's still out on that for sure. Even Precious, like, I mean, obviously this is a huge year for him, but I do think you can still have those guys in positions to develop, playing them with two starters. It's not like a mutually exclusive thing where you can't develop if there's only, unless there's only one starter on the floor. In fact, I think having more starters makes the environment for all these guys to develop within the role they're going to occupy as long-term NBA players a little bit more conducive. So, yeah, I would love to see them do away with these 1+4 groups, specifically one group that we're going to talk about for a little bit in the back end of the show, I'm sure. We'll come back to the side here, Oren. We'll get into the good, the bad, and the from the game against the Knicks. Thing we liked, thing we didn't like, a thing that's got us intrigued. We will do that in just a sec. But first, got to tell you about our friends over at FanDuel, the #1 sports book in all the land. You got to go check them out because right now is a perfect time to warm yourself up from this dreary, cold, garbagey weather with the hot offers over at FanDuel. Right now, new customers get $150 in bonus bets with any winning $5 money line bet. That's $150 if your team wins. You've been thinking about joining FanDuel. There's no better time to get in on the action. The app is super easy to use, and there's a wide range of betting options, including spreads, player props, over-unders, and more. You can also, it's not just for basketball or for football, of course. You got the NFL, NBA, you got Major League Baseball. You want to go put some money on where Shohei Ohtani's going. You can go and do that at FanDuel. Put it on the Dodgers, so when he doesn't come to the Blue Jays, at least you get some money out of it. It's the happiness hedge. Go do that, or whatever you please over at FanDuel with all of the various betting options. Visit FanDuel.com/lockedon and kick off the NFL season. FanDuel, official partner of the NFL. Okay, we round out the show here. Oren Weisfeld is here as we go into the good, the bad, and the way we end every episode of the show after a Toronto Raptors game. A thing we liked, thing we didn't like, and a thing that's got us a little intrigued, a burgeoning trend perhaps, or just something that made us raise an eyebrow from the game against the Knicks in this case on Friday. Let's start with the good. What you got for your good, Oren?
As I said, it was tough to find a good on the Raptors side of things. I landed on Chris Boucher, who had 11 points, bench high for the team, 2 assists, 3 rebounds, and his energy was very apparent, just making little things happen. But this has been a topic of Twitter. I don't want to go too long, Chris Boucher. This has been a topic on Twitter, is why is Jaden McDaniels getting minutes? Why is Chris not just getting more minutes? And I will say, I understand it from a perspective of, we know what we have in Chris. The franchise knows, Darko knows. And I think with Jaden and with Otto Porter and guys like that, we don't exactly know what we have. We don't know if there can maybe prop up those 4-man bench units a little bit more than Chris has, who's shown to be like really effective with starter heavy units, but not as effective in these bench units. So I understand it from that perspective. But again, if we're going back to like, how much are we really valuing winning? Chris should probably be like the most played guy off the bench, if that's purely the case. So good game, Chris Boucher.
You want to keep on tapping into his 42% clip from deep while it's still happening, right? Like that's nice. Right. It's been really cool to see those fall. Obviously, the energy stuff, the running the floor, it's all very nice from Chris Boucher. Yeah, I think that's a good one. My good is nothing to do with the Toronto Raptors at all. It's just watching Jalen Brunson. Or I don't know, I've kind of kicked this take around a little bit. I don't know if I've made it public on the podcast before, because I feel like it is a little bit sacrilege to say this, but Jalen Brunson, to me, Oren, and it's not just the Villanova connection, it's just the way he plays basketball. He's the closest thing right now to prime Kyle Lowry in the NBA. And I'm very jealous that the New York Knicks have a dude like that running their basketball team. It would be very cool if the Toronto Raptors had a dude like that running the basketball team right now. He's just so good, man, and does a lot of what Kyle used to do, just kind of like bullying his way to his spots. just kind of has a finger on the pulse of the game in a really, really obvious and commanding way, I would say. I love Jalen Brunson. I kind of secretly love this Knicks team, and I feel gross about it, but they're super fun to watch, and I just like watching good, competent basketball players play competent basketball. So yeah, Jalen Brunson is my good because he reminds me very much of Kyle Lowry circa like 2015, 2016, something like that. Not the heights that he reached in 2016-17 before he got hurt, where Kyle was like one of the 5 best players in basketball, but people won't tell you that. But pretty darn good nonetheless. Let's go to the bad, shall we? What you got for your bad?
So yeah, I'm gonna change it up a little bit and say I think the same as you was the OG plus bench unit that Darko went to. Was it the end of the third or the beginning of the fourth? I think
end of the third. They were a
See,
-5 in like 1.8 minutes. Ugh.
yes. So like what I said earlier about understanding the process of Scotty plus 4 bench guys, I do understand that process because Scotty is so intuitive. He can almost always get a pretty good shot when he has the ball in his hands and a bunch of guys cutting around him or screening around him. That's obviously never been the case with OG. He's never been a great creator himself. We've never seen this unit before this season, and to go to it at that time felt like very much like a desperation move. I know Joseph Cacharo asked Darko about it after the game, and Darko said basically that because OG got in foul trouble earlier in the game, his rotations got a little messed up, and then he decided to go on that to get OG some more minutes. But I would say, why is Schroeder not out there? Why is Siakam not out there? One more of these guys who is a bit of a ball handler and a creator to insulate those minutes a little bit. It just felt like a last minute heave to me from Darko when maybe that wasn't necessary at that point in the game. But yeah, it's something I don't want to see again this season.
Yeah, and it's not like Pascal has like not played entire third quarters this season, right? Like he's done that quite a bit. Like it was a weird one. Did not enjoy watching that lineup. And yeah, like Scotty, you get it. Where like he's had some troubles in those lineups too, but in theory, the type of player Scotty is the one who can kind of make other players better while also being good. And I just don't think that's ever been OG's bag. I think it was an unfair position to put him into. And it just, it lost the rope for the Raptors. They were down 13 going into that fourth quarter, and largely because they rolled that lineup out there and got waxed for a couple minutes. Not the best. My bad was simply wasting that Scotty Barnes performance. We haven't really talked about it yet. Man, he was awesome in this game. 29, 9 and 4, 5 steals, a block, 13 and 19, 3-7 from deep. Just a really forceful, aggressive, like high energy, just like full of pop and everything that you want from Scotty Barnes from the jump. Like he had that and one right out of the gate, sort of on the move, through contact, like just a really, really awesome start to finish game from Scotty Barnes. And it's a damn shame it was wasted in a loss by 13 points. He was great. Let's go to the what you got for your here, Oren?
Yeah, so also on Scotty Barnes, my I'm intrigued by these Scotty at center units that I believe the Raptors went to at the start of the fourth quarter, and it's been a trend in the last few games, I believe, because Precious has been not good enough, where Darko's kind of had to make these decisions where he either closes the game with Scotty at center or he goes to Scotty at center before putting Pirtle back in, like in the Knicks game, because he doesn't want to play Pirtle for 12 straight minutes in the fourth quarter, but he also is kind of leaking points with Precious at the center. So he's found these Scotty at center lineups, and they've been massively impactful. Plus 43 point differential per 100 minutes this season. So yeah, they've been ridiculous, but also, I've seen a ton of debate on Twitter about them, even so much so, should we start Scotty? Should we trade Pirtle? I would remind people that last year, the same lineup combinations with Scotty at center were terrible, right? And we've seen it for many years when, as soon as they let go of Serge and Mark, and they kind of brought in these replacement level centers, and Nurse tried to go to these small ball lineups. It didn't work. Like it didn't work from a rebounding perspective. It didn't work from a rim protection perspective. So my comes from a place of, has Scotty really just gotten like bigger and like stronger enough to where he can man those units for small minutes, or is this just small sample size theater that is bound to go back to the regression we've seen in the last couple of seasons? Because if this is a viable unit that you can play for long periods of time, it definitely changes the roster building perspective from the Raptors.
My from this game, Oren, you got over there on the Knicks, this really deep, good basketball team, and poor Immanuel Quickley playing just 19 minutes. He's one of the best pick and roll ball handlers statistically in the NBA this season. Just like a really, really solid player. But that dude's got to be playing more than 19 minutes. What a world it would be if the Toronto Raptors could just take Immanuel Quickley off of the Knicks' hands. It would be good for everybody, right? The Knicks would have easier rotations to figure out, get more minutes for Dante DiVincenzo and Josh Hart. The Raptors would get their guard to pair with Scotty Barnes for the long haul. I think that the Raptors should save Immanuel Quickley and save the Knicks, frankly, from these very difficult decisions they have with paying him and all of this stuff, and just bring him to Toronto. That would be pretty cool to me. Too bad that damn lawsuit is going to prevent any sort of interaction between these two teams until
I was
the
just
Raptors
going to suggest a Chris Boucher for Immanuel Quickley trade, because they lost Obi Toppin at that kind of backup power forward. Like, they could use a Chris Boucher, but like you said, those teams are probably not going to make a deal anytime soon.
The way that you have to make this happen is the Raptors find a way. Maybe they move on from Pascal. They clear all the cap space. They keep OG, but then everyone else is gone, and they throw the most toxic offer sheet possible.
Oh my
Immanuel
God,
Quickley.
that's such a good idea.
Right?
It'd be hilarious,
right?
too.
This is one of the avenues where I'm okay with Pascal Siakam getting shipped for 60 cents on the dollar. Is if it leads to a cap space scenario where you can ruin the Knicks' day by sending just like an Alan Crabb level toxic offer sheet at Immanuel Quickley, who would clearly help his team so much. Oh, the narrative.
For sure. The narrative would be hilarious, because even at this game, we had several Knick reporters ask both coaches, like, is there a little more to this game given that the lawsuit is going on? And I'm like, come on, guys, we're really pushing it here. Like,
I don't think Tom Thibodeau or Darko Rajakovic really care about James Dolan's petty grievances.
Or the players, for that matter.
100%. No one likes James Dolan, not even people on the Knicks. All right, we will leave it there. That feels like a good place to jump off. Thanks for jumping on here, Oren. It was a blast. I felt like we covered a lot of ground here. Do you got anything you want to promote for the good people out there?
Nothing too immediate, but you can follow me on X at Oren Weisfeld, which is where I post all my work. And just continuing to come for the Raptors, the NBA, Canadian basketball this season. And I'll post it all there. But yeah, thanks for having me. This was fun.
Of course, man. That'll do it for today. Thanks so much for tuning in. Please follow, subscribe, rate, review, etc., wherever you get your podcast. It's always appreciated when you go ahead and do that. You can also go and hit the little notification bell over on YouTube and get heads up every single time the show is set to premiere. We'll be back again tomorrow as Vivek Jacob will walk by, and I think we're going to bust out an old parlor game. We're going to play a little round of Raptors Would You Rather. So you have that to look forward to tomorrow. Games get back on the schedule on Wednesday night against the Heat, so that'll be fun. But in the meantime, we'll keep you covered here with your daily shows. Thanks to our everydayers and all the people who rock with the show. We'll be back again on Tuesday. Thanks so much for hanging. Bye-bye.